From the moment you are young, you are taught something that sounds noble. Be kind, be good. You are told that kindness will return to you, that people will remember it. This idea is repeated so often that it begins to feel like a law of nature, as if kindness functions like gravity. But it doesn't. It functions more like blood in open water. You don't attract angels, you attract predators. Not because people are evil in a dramatic way, but because human beings are driven by need, not virtue, and kindness is often interpreted as availability. Almost everyone has a moment in life where they think, I was there for them, I helped them, I sacrificed. Why did they leave me the moment I needed them? This question is not new. It has echoed through centuries, and yet people keep asking it because they were taught a comforting story instead of a true one. The truth is this: most people do not form bonds based on morality, they form them based on utility. What you provide, how you make them feel, what you absorb so they don't have to. When kindness becomes your defining feature, you quietly announce something dangerous. I will endure more than I should. And the world listens. Kindness gives a temporary sense of meaning. You feel useful. You feel needed. It becomes part of your identity. I'm a good person. I wouldn't do what others do. I'm not selfish like them. But notice something subtle. This self-image requires an audience. It requires contrast. It requires others to behave worse than you. Which means, without realizing it, your goodness is tied to their weakness. And this creates a quiet imbalance. Because the moment kindness is expected, it stops being appreciated. It becomes a service. Here is the unspoken rule of social life. When you give too much, people assume you can give more. Not because they are cruel, but because humans naturally push limits. Just as water fills every empty space, human desire expands to consume whatever is available. Kindness creates space, and desire rushes in. You think you are being generous, they think you are stable supply. Observe the people who are called selfish. They are not always cruel. They are not always loud. They simply stop earlier than you do. They withdraw sooner. They say no faster. They protect their energy instinctively. And because of this, something strange happens. People treat them carefully. Why? Because scarcity creates value. Unpredictability creates respect. Boundaries create distance, and distance creates importance. Kind people believe, if I show people my good heart, they will protect it. Reality works in reverse. People protect what they fear losing. They protect what they cannot easily replace. And excessive kindness signals replaceability. You become the background character in your own life, always present, never prioritized. Cruelty is obvious. It wounds quickly. But misplaced kindness destroys slowly. It creates confusion. You start doubting yourself. Maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe I was misunderstood. This is how good people exhaust themselves, trying to earn something that cannot be earned. Respect is not a reward for kindness. It is a response to self-respect. Watch how people behave when you stop giving. Not dramatically, not with anger, just quietly. You'll notice who disappears, who grows distant, who suddenly finds fault in you. They will say, you've changed. What they really mean is you no longer serve me the way you used to. This moment hurts, but it is also the first moment of clarity. Kindness is not evil, but it is dangerous when unconditional. It must be selective, measured, guarded, given as a choice, not as a reflex. The mistake is not kindness itself. The mistake is believing it is a shield. In the upcoming sessions, we will confront a darker truth: why people instinctively respect those who withhold, why suffering sharpens perception, and why withdrawing kindness can feel like cruelty, even when it is an act of self-preservation. This is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming awake to tackle the present.
You might think the danger of kindness comes from bad people. That would be comforting, but it's not true. Most harm caused by kindness does not come from cruel people. It comes from ordinary people doing what feels natural to them. And this is the part most people never understand. People do not listen carefully to words. They watch behavior. Behavior is treated like a signal. When you give without resistance, when you stay even after being disrespected, you are not seen as good. You are seen as safe to push. Not consciously, not with planning, but instinctively. The mind thinks, this person won't leave. This person will adjust. This person will tolerate more. And once the mind learns this, it does not unlearn it easily. Many confuse being liked with being respected. They are not equal. Being liked means people enjoy your presence. Being respected means people consider your limits. Kindness increases liking. Boundaries increase respect. When kindness exists without limits, it creates closeness without caution. People relax too much. They speak carelessly. They demand without thinking. They forget your effort quickly, not because they are bad, but because familiarity lowers attention. People value what costs them something: time, risk, adjustment. When access to you is easy, when your help is guaranteed, there is no cost. And when there is no cost, there is little appreciation. This is why people remember favors they struggled to get more than favors handed freely. It is not gratitude that fades, it is attention. Why saying yes too often backfires. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, something small breaks inside you. But something else happens outside you too. The world adjusts to the version of you that never resists. People plan around your availability. They expect your flexibility. They assume your silence means agreement. Over time, your yes stops being a choice. It becomes a default setting. And defaults are not respected. There is a moment, quiet and easy to miss, when kindness turns into obligation. You are no longer thanked. You are reminded. You'll understand. You're always there. You don't mind, right? Notice the language. It assumes your compliance before you speak. This is not manipulation. It is habit. And habits form fastest around people who never interrupt them. Why people react badly when you change. The moment you pull back, the moment you hesitate, the moment you protect yourself, people feel discomfort, not because you are wrong, but because you broke a pattern they depended on. They will say, "You're cold now. You've changed. You're selfish." These words are not descriptions. They are protests. They are reactions to lost convenience. Why this feels so confusing? You did what you were taught. You were patient. You were helpful. You were understanding. And yet, instead of feeling valued, you feel drained. Instead of feeling safe, you feel exposed. This confusion happens because society praises kindness in words, but rewards self-protection in behavior. No one explains this early. You are expected to discover it through exhaustion, the painful realization. At some point, a person realizes, people didn't care about how much this cost me, not because they are heartless, but because your cost was invisible. You hid it well. You smiled through it. You stayed quiet. You absorbed discomfort without complaint. And invisible sacrifices rarely earn respect. What this does to the mind. Long-term, unprotected kindness creates resentment. Not loud resentment, quiet resentment. You become tired, then distant, then numb. You start avoiding people you once cared about, and then you feel guilty for that too. This is how good people burn out. Not from hate, from overexposure. If kindness without limits weakens your position, then the real question becomes, how do you stay humane without becoming vulnerable? How do you protect yourself without turning bitter? In the next part, we will examine something uncomfortable. Why emotional distance creates safety. Why withdrawal feels cruel but is often necessary.
and why learning to be less available does not make you worse. It makes you clear.
You know, there is something most people learn too late. Closeness does not create safety, but distance does. This sounds cold at first, but it explains more about human behavior than kindness ever did. Why people behave better at a distance. Notice how people act with strangers. They are polite. They choose words carefully. Now notice how people act with those who are always close. They interrupt. They demand. They assume. This is not because closeness is bad. It is because distance forces awareness. When people know access to you is limited, they pay attention. When they feel you can be lost, they behave carefully. Distance creates consequence. Being emotionally open feels honest. It feels real. But openness without limits teaches others something risky. You can unload here. You can take space here. You can enter without knocking. Soon, your emotional space becomes crowded. Other people's problems live there. Other people's chaos becomes your responsibility. Not because they asked permission, but because you never closed the door. Why constant access lowers value. Anything always available loses importance. This is true for objects. It is true for time. It is true for people. When you reply instantly, when you always show up, when you never disappear, you teach others that your presence is guaranteed, and what is guaranteed is rarely protected. Scarcity does not make you cruel. It makes you noticeable. The fear of pulling back. Most kind people know they should step back, but they don't. Why? Because pulling back feels like punishment. It feels unfair. It feels like betrayal. They worry, what if I hurt them? What if they think I don't care? What if I become someone I don't like? This fear comes from confusing distance with harm. They are not the same. Distance is not silence forever. Distance does not mean disappearing. It means choosing when and how you show up. You stop pouring from an empty place. You stop explaining your limits. You simply have them. Why explaining yourself weakens you. When you explain your boundaries too much, you invite negotiation. People begin to debate your limits. They ask, why? Just this once? You're overthinking. The more you explain, the more people feel entitled to adjust you. Strong boundaries are quiet. They do not argue. They do not persuade. They simply exist. Distance feels wrong because kindness was tied to self-sacrifice. You were taught that caring means enduring. So when you stop enduring, your mind labels it as selfish. But look carefully. You are not harming anyone. You are only removing unlimited access. That discomfort others feel is not caused by your cruelty. It is caused by their adjustment. Who leaves when you step back? This is one of the hardest moments. Some people leave when you create distance, not because they didn't care at all, but because the relationship was built on availability. When the supply changes, the connection collapses. This hurts, but it also reveals truth. Some bonds exist only as long as one person gives more. What remains after distance? The relationships that survive distance are different. They are calmer, more respectful, less demanding. People think before reaching out. They choose words better. They value moments more. Distance filters noise. It leaves intention. What you gain internally. Something else happens too. Your mind becomes quieter. You stop scanning for needs. You stop feeling responsible for emotions that aren't yours. You begin to feel solid again. Not happy, not excited, just stable. Distance protects you, but distance alone is not enough, because without understanding desire, you will repeat the same patterns with new people.
In the next part, we will confront the real engine behind selfishness. Why people always want more, why satisfaction never lasts, and why learning this truth changes how you give and to whom.
If you want to understand why kindness becomes dangerous, you must first understand desire as not a moral problem, not as greed, but as a force. Desire is not logical. Desire does not ask, is this fair? Is this enough? Have I taken too much? Desire asks only one thing. Can I have more? This is not a flaw unique to bad people. It is a basic human condition. When a need is satisfied, it does not disappear. It moves. From food to comfort, from comfort to attention, from attention to control. This is why generosity has no natural stopping point. The one who gives must stop it. Why gratitude fades so quickly? Gratitude is not stable. It appears briefly, then dissolves into expectation. What was once appreciated becomes normal. What was once special becomes routine. This is why yesterday's kindness becomes today's minimum. People do not wake up deciding to be ungrateful. They simply adapt. And adaptation erases memory. Why kindness feeds desire? Kindness removes friction. It smooths experience. It reduces effort. It makes life easier. And anything that makes life easier becomes something the mind wants to keep. Not occasionally, constantly. When you make yourself a source of relief, you invite dependence. And dependence does not respect the source. It drains it. The mistake of expecting balance. Many kind people believe in balance. I gave, so they'll give back. I helped, so they'll remember. But desire is not a scale. It does not measure what you gave. It measures what it can still take. Balance only exists where limits exist. Without limits, giving creates appetite, not equality. Why people don't notice when they take too much? People rarely think, I'm asking too much. They think, they didn't say no. Silence is interpreted as permission. Endurance is interpreted as capacity. Your suffering does not signal danger. It signals strength, and strength attracts demand. Why saying enough feels wrong? Stopping feels unnatural because desire never stops. When you interrupt it, you feel like the problem. You think, why can't I just handle it? Why does this bother me now? Why am I suddenly tired? Because desire grew quietly while you stayed silent. The exhaustion you feel is delayed awareness, the pattern that repeats. You give, they adapt. You give more, they expect more.
Then one day you stop, and suddenly you are cold, different, selfish. Not because you changed your values, but because you changed the flow. Desire hates interruption. Why desire creates disappointment? Desire always promises satisfaction, but satisfaction is short. Once the mind gets what it wants, it immediately looks ahead. This is why no amount of giving creates lasting peace. It creates movement, and movement requires fuel. You were the fuel, the dangerous hope. The most dangerous belief is this: if I just give a little more, it will settle. It never does. Desire does not settle, it migrates. And if you attach your worth to meeting it, you will always feel behind. What this means for kindness. Kindness must understand desire, or it will be consumed by it. This does not mean becoming harsh. It means recognizing a truth. Not everyone deserves access to what costs you. Not every request deserves an answer. Not every need deserves your energy. Giving without understanding desire is like pouring water into sand. Where we go next. Now that you understand why people want more, the next question is harder. Why does withdrawing kindness feel like cruelty? Why does protecting yourself feel immoral? Why does restraint feel like betrayal, even when it saves you? That is where we go next.
There is a deep reason protecting yourself feels wrong. It is not because you are heartless. It is because you were trained to confuse goodness with sacrifice. How morality was taught to you. From early on, you learned a simple rule. Good people give, bad people take. This rule sounds clean, it sounds safe, but it is incomplete because it ignores something essential. Good people also stop. Why endurance was praised. You were praised for being patient, for being understanding, for being mature. These traits often meant you stayed quiet, you adjusted, you absorbed discomfort. Over time, endurance became your identity. So when you stop enduring, it feels like betrayal, not of others, but of the person you believed you were. Why saying no triggers guilt. Guilt is not proof of wrongdoing. It is proof of habit. When your nervous system is used to compliance, resistance feels dangerous. Your body reacts before your mind can explain. Tight chest, racing thoughts, need to justify. This is not morality speaking. It is conditioning. Why others call it cruel. When you protect yourself, others lose comfort, and discomfort seeks explanation. They rarely say, I relied too much on you. I took your availability for granted. Instead, they say, you're selfish. You've changed. You don't care anymore. These words are not judgments of your character. They are reactions to loss of access. Why kind people believe the accusation. Kind people accept blame easily. They assume fault. They think, if someone is hurt, I must have done something wrong. But pain alone does not mean injustice. Sometimes pain means adjustment. Sometimes pain means a pattern has ended. The difference between harm and discomfort. Harm damages someone's dignity or safety. Discomfort removes convenience. These are often confused. When you withdraw endless giving, you create discomfort, not harm. But people describe it as harm because they lost something they depended on. Why self-protection looks like coldness. Self-protection is quiet. It does not explain. It does not plead. It does not reassure endlessly. This silence is often mistaken for cruelty because it does not perform care. But real care does not require performance. It requires presence when chosen, not forced.
Why you feel the urge to fix it. After setting a boundary, you feel the urge to soften it, to over-explain, to apologize, to compensate. This urge comes from fear of abandonment. You learned that being needed kept people close. So when you remove usefulness, you fear being left. This fear is old, and it has ruled you longer than you realize. The hidden cost of never being cruel. When you refuse all cruelty, even necessary cruelty, you allow slow damage. You become tired, then distant, then resentful. And resentment poisons kindness. In trying to stay good, you become quietly bitter. Why some cruelty is actually precision. There is a difference between cruelty and clarity. Cruelty harms without purpose. Clarity cuts without hatred. A clean boundary hurts once. Endless tolerance hurts continuously. One is sharp, the other is slow. What changes when you accept this? When you accept that protection may look unkind, you stop arguing with yourself. You stop proving your goodness. You stop explaining your limits. You begin to act from calm rather than guilt. Where we go next. Understanding this is not enough, because even with boundaries, the world will test you again. In the next part, we will look at why silence is more powerful than explanation, why withdrawing attention changes behavior, and why saying less often achieves more than saying everything.
There is a moment many people mishandle. It comes after they set a boundary. They stop giving. They pull back. They protect themselves. And then they talk too much. Why people rush to explain. Silence makes others uncomfortable. And when others are uncomfortable, kind people feel responsible. So they explain. They say, I didn't mean it like that. I hope you don't take this the wrong way. I'm just overwhelmed right now. They try to soften the impact, but something important is lost in this process. What explanation really does? Explanation invites debate. Once you explain, you turn your boundary into a discussion. People begin to question it. But I didn't mean to hurt you. You're being sensitive. Just this once. Now your limit is no longer a limit. It is a negotiation. And negotiations favor the one who wants more.
Why silence ends the argument. Silence offers no handle. There's nothing to twist, nothing to counter, nothing to guilt. When you act and do not explain, people are forced to accept reality instead of arguing with words. Behavior is harder to fight than speech. Why silence feels dangerous. Silence feels rude because you were trained to soothe. You learned that discomfort must be fixed immediately, but not all discomfort deserves repair. Some discomfort teaches people how to adjust. Silence lets that learning happen. The power of withdrawing attention. Attention is currency. Where you place it shapes behavior. When someone crosses a line and still receives conversation, reassurance, emotional engagement, they learn nothing. But when attention is withdrawn, something shifts. People reflect. They notice absence. They become careful, not out of fear, but out of awareness. Why attention works better than words. Words are easy to dismiss. Attention is not. You can argue with words. You cannot argue with absence. Absence forces interpretation, and interpretation leads to self-correction.
Why silence is often misread. Silence is often labeled as passive-aggressive, cold, or immature. But these labels appear when someone loses access. Silence is not aggression. It is containment. It keeps your energy from leaking. When silence is not avoidance. Avoidance runs from discomfort. Silence stands still inside it. You are not disappearing forever. You are not punishing. You are simply refusing to explain your worth. What changes when you stop explaining? You feel lighter, not because people suddenly behave perfectly, but because you stop carrying the weight of their reactions. You realize, I don't need to convince anyone to respect me. Respect forms around consistency, not persuasion. Why people eventually adjust. Most people test boundaries once, some test twice, but very few keep testing what never responds. Silence removes reward, and behavior without reward fades. This is not manipulation. It is natural consequence, the calm that comes after. Once you stop explaining, your decisions become quieter, cleaner. You act, you move on. No mental replay, no rehearsed conversations, just space. Where we go next. Now we reach a difficult truth. Even after all this, some people will still leave, not because you failed, but because not everyone belongs in a life with limits. In the next part, we will explore why losing people is not always loss, why fewer connections can feel safer than many, and why solitude often appears after clarity.
There is a moment that follows silence, after boundaries, after distance, after restraint. People leave. This is where most people panic, the fear of being left. Being left feels like failure. It triggers a deep thought. If they walked away, I must have done something wrong. But this belief comes from an old mistake, equating presence with care. Why some people leave when you change. Some people were not attached to you. They were attached to your availability, your patience, your willingness to absorb. When those disappear, the bond collapses, not because the connection was fake, but because it was uneven. The role you quietly played. You were the stabilizer, the listener, the fixer, the one who adjusted. Your role kept things smooth. When you stopped playing it, the structure failed. This reveals something important. Some relationships survive only when one person bends. Why this hurts so much? It hurts because you invested silently. You didn't ask for credit. You didn't keep score. You didn't demand balance. So when it ends, there is no closure, just exhaustion and disbelief. Why you miss them even when you shouldn't. You miss the habit, the routine, the familiarity, not always the reality. Your mind remembers comfort, even when the comfort was costly. Loss confuses memory. Why fewer people can feel safer. When your circle shrinks, your nervous system relaxes. There are fewer expectations, fewer interruptions, fewer emotional debts. You breathe again. This is not emptiness. It is relief. Why quality appears after loss. Only after separation do some connections deepen. The ones that remain become clearer. They do not demand constant access. They respect silence. They adjust naturally. They do not punish distance. They understand it. Why solitude appears here. After clarity, solitude often follows. Not because you hate people, but because you finally experience yourself without constant emotional noise. Solitude feels strange at first. Then it feels honest. Why solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is wanting connection but lacking it. Solitude is choosing space because it protects you. They feel similar at first, but one drains, the other restores. The dangerous urge to refill the space. After people leave, there is a temptation to replace them quickly, to return to noise, to feel needed again. This is how old patterns return. Space should not be filled immediately. It should be understood. What this stage teaches you. You learn that not everyone deserves closeness. Not every absence is damage. Not every ending is a mistake. Some endings are corrections. Where we go next. Once you accept loss, you face a new challenge. How do you give without disappearing? How do you care without surrendering yourself? How do you remain humane without returning to old traps? That is next.
After loss and silence, a question remains. If unlimited kindness destroys you and total distance isolates you, what remains? This is where most people get confused. They think the only options are give everything, give nothing. But there is a third way. The difference between kindness and self-erasure. Kindness becomes dangerous only when it erases you, when you help at your own expense, when you stay while shrinking, when you give while resenting. This is not kindness. It is slow disappearance. Real kindness does not require self-destruction. Why controlled kindness is stronger. Controlled kindness has a filter. It asks, do I want to give this? Can I give this without cost? Will I regret this later? If the answer is no, kindness pauses, not forever, just until it becomes clean again. Giving from strength, not pressure. Kindness given from pressure feels heavy. You feel tense, you feel rushed, you feel trapped. Kindness given from strength feels light. There is no inner argument, no resentment, no need to explain. Your body already knows the difference. It is not how much you give, it is when. Giving when you are tired creates bitterness. Giving when you are calm creates connection. The same act feels completely different depending on your state. Kindness should never require recovery. Being available always is not care. It is exposure. Care is selective presence. You show up when it matters. You withdraw when it costs too much. This balance protects both sides. When you stop explaining, your kindness becomes clearer. People feel it instead of hearing about it. Short gestures, direct help, then space. No speeches, no promises. This prevents misunderstanding. Some people will still misread you. They will think you are distant. They will think you are cold. This is unavoidable. Trying to correct every misunderstanding returns you to overgiving. Peace comes when you stop managing perception. Kindness used as a tool for connection always turns against you, because love built on giving requires constant payment. True connection survives pauses. If it collapses without effort, it was never stable. What changes inside you? When kindness no longer costs you, your mind quiets. You stop counting favors. You stop tracking reactions. You stop fearing withdrawal. You give because you want to, not because you must. This way of living feels strange at first, because you were taught good people always give. But good people who last know when to stop. They protect their energy so their kindness stays alive. The quiet confidence that appears. Something subtle happens. You no longer rush. You no longer overextend. You no longer prove. People sense this. They adjust their tone. They respect your time. They approach with care. Not because you demand it, but because your presence feels grounded. Now comes the final shift. After understanding kindness, distance, desire, and loss, there is one last truth to face. Why understanding people often makes you feel alone. Why clarity separates you. And why freedom is quieter than happiness.
That is where this journey ends.
After everything you have seen, there is one feeling that surprises most people. It is not happiness. It is lightness. When you understand how people work, you stop expecting what they cannot give. You stop waiting for fairness. You stop hoping for balance. You stop believing effort guarantees care. This awareness separates you, not because you feel superior, but because illusion no longer comforts you. Most people live on expectation. You no longer can. Clarity removes fantasy, and fantasy is what connects many people. They bond over hope, over assumptions, over what they want things to mean. When you see things as they are, you stop participating in shared illusions. This creates distance, not outwardly, internally. Sadness comes from loss you didn't choose. This distance is chosen. You are not abandoned, you are unhooked. From endless giving, from silent resentment, from emotional debt, the noise fades. Why freedom is quiet. Freedom does not excite the nervous system. It calms it. There is no rush, no urgency, no need to prove. You wake up with fewer demands on your energy. You move slower, not because you are weak, but because nothing is chasing you anymore. Happiness depends on conditions, people behaving well, effort being returned, kindness being rewarded. These conditions are unstable. Freedom does not depend on them. Freedom exists even when others disappoint you. What you stop doing. You stop explaining yourself, chasing appreciation, overgiving, fixing what isn't yours, not aggressively, naturally. What you keep. You keep calm attention, selective kindness, silence, self-respect. These do not shout. They endure.
You do not become heartless. You become precise. You care without attachment. You help without losing yourself. You leave without guilt. This is not coldness. It is clean care. Why this life feels smaller and better. Your circle shrinks. Your obligations reduce. Your mind clears. You no longer carry the weight of other people's desires. Life feels smaller and more manageable. Kindness was never the problem. Unprotected kindness was. Once you understand this, you stop being punished for being good. You become steady, and steadiness is rare. The ending that isn't loud. There is no victory here. No applause, just a quiet understanding. You were never meant to save everyone. You were only meant to stop abandoning yourself. And when that happens, kindness stops being dangerous. It becomes yours again.